Well, just two thoughts off the top. First off, I do a lot of speaking in forums like this and in some that are a little bit larger. And I must say that it is the first time in my professional history, and I've been in business for 30 years, that I have ever been preceded by someone on roller skates. And I'm pretty sure it'll never happen again. So this was a very special day for me. The second is, I'm old, I'm falling apart, I have arthritis in both knees. And if I had done that 2-knee stop, that's where I would be for the rest of the night, if not the rest of my life. So just brief background. I am the President and Chief Executive Officer of Isle of Capri Casinos. Isle of Capri is one of the largest publicly traded gaming companies in the United States. We're a $1 billion company. We have 15 properties across the United States. We're in the process of building 2 more, so our portfolio will be 17 within the next couple of years. And our closest casino is actually right down the road in Boonville. And I usually don't get to say that because our casinos are generally in locations that are pretty far away from where I'm speaking. So it's nice to speak in the backyard of one of our properties. I have been in the business for 30 years. I have worked for 4 different $1 billion publicly traded companies, and I have been at Isle for about 4 years. My actual degree is in journalism, and I started at CBS in Philadelphia, working in both radio and television. So I'm going to throw a lot of information at you today. I had asked the young lady who had connected me with this group what she thought would be interesting for you to hear. And she had said that one of the things that would be valuable is to talk a little bit about breaking the glass ceiling. I get asked that all the time, and I always come at it from a slightly different perspective. This is actually a presentation that I developed and gave in Las Vegas about 2 weeks ago for the launch of what we are calling our Global Gaming Women Initiative, which is linking women in gaming all across the United States. I am involved. I'm going to leave time for Q&A at the end, so I'm going to run through this pretty quick. And I'm driving, right?
You got control.
Okay. Yeah. Can someone in back drive?
You bet.
Huh?
You bet.
Okay. So if I just call slide, you'll slide me.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yeah.
Not that slide.
Yeah,
like
not that slide.
Okay. Because if I move out front, then I'm going to mess up your leg, so I'm just going to stay. All right, it's all good.
It's your floor.
Okay. I'm involved in a business organization in St. Louis called the Regional Business Council. For the last few years, have chaired their Women's Leadership Giving Initiative. And one of the tasks that I always get to do, which is one of my favorite tasks in this role, is to introduce the guest speaker every year at the big luncheon that we have at Forest Park in St. Louis. So a few years ago, that speaker was a woman named Gail Evans, and Gail had just written a book called Play Like a Man, Win Like a Woman. I'm going to be very honest with you, I'm a voracious reader. I usually stay away from these kind of books because I usually don't learn a lot. And so in this particular case, I said, well, I'm just going to kind of do my homework in advance. I don't need to read the book, I just need to find out about this person. So I went online, I did my research. Can you pull up the slide that has Gail's background? There we go. Okay. So I started looking into Gail's background. Gail had worked at the White House, special counsel to the President, Lyndon B. Johnson. She was instrumental in the creation of the President's Committee on Equal Employment Opportunity and the 1966 Civil Rights Act. She joined CNN at its inception in 1980. She was promoted to Executive Vice President in 1996. She was the first female Executive Vice President of Domestic Networks in 2000. She went on to become a member of the CNN Executive Committee and chair the CNN Programming Task Force. And I thought, this is a woman with some credentials. I'd like to hear what she has to say. The name of her book was Play Like a Man, Win Like a Woman, which I thought was very interesting. So when I got to the luncheon that day, I met Gail in the back of the room. And Gail said to me, do you play golf? And I thought, usually someone says, hi, how are you, how you doing? Do you play golf? And I looked at her and I said, not really. And she just kind of shook her head. And I thought, wow, that's such a strange introduction. So I went on to give my introduction. And Gail gets up, and the first thing that she says when she looks at the audience is, how many women in here play golf? So let me ask that question of the women in the room. I really can't see your hands, but raise your hands if you play golf. Raise them high. Raise your hand. No. Raise your hands if you play golf. Okay. So she looked around the room and then she said, okay. She goes, now, raise your hands if you really like the game, as opposed to play because someone told you you had to play golf in order to be productive in the business world. And it was amazing because 3/4 of the women brought their hands down. And she said, well, girls, let me tell you a secret. She said, you can go out, you can play, you can go out there and eat bad hot dogs and shoot bad shots, and you can do all kinds of things so that you can hang the boys. But at the end of the day, the deal gets done in the locker room, gals, and you ain't getting in there. I went out and bought the book that night. Because she's right. I mean, she's right if you think about it. Golf, if you like to golf, but there's a lot of ways that you can network. There's a lot of ways that you can be successful in the business world without having to play the game by somebody else's rules. So what I did is I just kind of went through our book real quick. Next slide. There you go. Her book is really what men know about success that women need to learn. And I went through her book real quick and I just picked up a couple of her rules, basically her ground rules. And I'm just going to throw them out there for you today, just for something to think about as you're listening to the speakers for the rest of the day. One of those 4 publicly traded companies that I worked for was Trump Entertainment Resorts. I worked for Donald Trump for 2 years. And I'm sure I'll get a question about that at the end. But I worked for Donald for 2 years, and one of the things that Donald used to talk about all the time is setting the table. You know, for Donald, you set the table. You got ready for a meeting, you made sure you knew who was in the room, whatever it might be. You know, if you're going to go do the big deal, you have to know who the players are. So I'm just going to set the table a little bit for the rest of the day, things for you to think about. Okay, her ground rule number 1. You are who you say you are. Women should not tolerate a passive role. Now, what does she mean by this? I am so guilty of this in my professional career. How many times have we worked on a project, a big project, where we have spent a tremendous amount of time doing it? Time, effort, energy, whatever it might be. How many times have we done that? And then we get to the end of the project, we deliver it to whomever it was done for, your boss or whoever it might be, and they look at you and they say, wow, great job. And what do we say? It was nothing. How many times have we done that? How many times have we sat there and said, oh, it was nothing? Now, what you're supposed to say is you're supposed to sit there and say, yes, thank you. I worked very hard on this. I did a tremendous amount of research, and I hope that it really creates value for shareholders. But so often what happens is when women are in a situation like this, we basically take a passive role. Structure your world around your own choices, or someone will make them for you. Again, that's being passive. So if there is something that you want in your professional career, a lot of times what women do is they sit there and say, if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, I will be noticed for it. So people will sit there and look at me and say, hey, she's really good at that. She does a really good job. But if you don't toot your own horn, if you don't get out there and tell people how good you are and how hard you're working, they're not going to know it and they're not going to see it. So if you don't sit there and say, this is what I want from my career, pay attention to me for these reasons, don't assume that someone is going to notice you. And if you want to take charge of your business life, you have to send that message. I mean, if you are interested in moving up the corporate ladder, when we sit here and we talk about the glass ceiling all the time, you're never going to crash the glass ceiling if you don't tell someone you want to. I mean, it's that important, basically, just to be vocal about it and to talk a little bit about what's important to you. Okay, second ground rule, one prize doesn't fit all. This, I think, is very interesting because it talks about the fact that women demand a greater sense of fulfillment in their jobs, and it's not always about the trappings of success. So when women enter the workforce, very often what they're looking for is loving your job. I mean, something that really means something to you, as opposed to sitting there and saying, I've got the business cards, you know, that show that I've been successful in my career. When women choose to fulfill ourselves by what we do rather than what we make, we're not playing the game the way a lot of men play that, and they don't necessarily understand that. You have to start by sitting there and saying, what is your goal? I mean, what do you want in the end? If what you want in the end is the money and the power and the business card that goes along with it, then you have to be vocal about it. But if what you want is a job that really means something to you, and it doesn't mean they have to be mutually exclusive, But if what you really want is a job that means something to you, doing what you love, then you should do that. And what she talks about in the book is, if you make that decision, if you make the decision to do something because you really love it, then don't live in what she calls divine discontent. Because so often what happens is, you get to a point in your career, you have a job that you really love, but you look around you and you say, well, all these other people are successful, all these other people are moving up. If that's not what you're all about, then you don't need to do that. You know, be successful in your job, love what you're doing. And then the third, it's another one that I think is very interesting, work isn't a sorority. And that doesn't mean, it's not a coffee clutch, it doesn't mean you hang out in the cafeteria and, talk about hairstyles and stuff like that. What it means is that women enter the job arena with a stronger urge to form relationships than men do. Men enter the job arena generally to get things done. And I understand that I'm talking in sweeping generalities here, but men generally sit there and say, what's the job, what am I doing, how am I going to approach this? Women basically enter the job arena sitting there and saying, I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to make friends and build relationships.